Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Light of the world, you stepped down into darkness, opened my eyes, let me see beauty that made this heart adore you, hope of a life spent with you. King of all days, oh so highly exalted, glorious in heaven above. Humbly you came to the earth you created, all for love's sake became poor. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. And I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross, and I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. Okay, team. And what we see happening in Egypt is like a type. Because there too, Christ came down. We see in 1 Corinthians 10, the people on the Exodus followed by a light that followed them, and that was Christ. What we're going to do today is have a look at the evidence of Jewish settlement in Goshen, or in the land of Ramesses, as it's stated in Genesis 47. So we'll watch the video a bit more, and on the board I will write down the points that show evidence found that the Jews indeed settled in Egypt, and that it is all true. So we go to the video, and I will interrupt it from moment to moment to write down. So first, please write down what you see on the board here: evidence of Jewish settlement in Goshen, or as it's called, the land of Ramesses. Ramses, Ramesses. The spellings are different documents, but they mean the same thing. Okay, so we now go to the video. In a moment, I'll switch the light off, which gives you time to write this down, and we write several points underneath in this lesson. Right. So yesterday we saw that there are actually two cities on top of each other, and that the real city from the Middle Kingdom period is Avaris, with the modern one built on top of it. And that's where we go.
Of the city of Ramses, the building of Ramses, is what we call an anachronism. It's something that's been added into the text later by an editor. So what the editor is basically saying is, this is the place where the Israelites built the store city, and we know it today as Ramses. Well, in the ancient times it was called Avaris.
Okay, so the people would know the area, the region.
The people of the Bible would have known where Ramses was, and where therefore their ancestors actually built the city.
I also found that the Bible, in the book of Genesis, uses the word Ramses hundreds of years before Pharaoh Ramses or his city existed to describe the land where Joseph's family settled. So if the name Ramesses in Genesis does not refer to the time of Pharaoh Ramesses II, then why should the mention of Ramesses in the book of Exodus be any different?
Now this Avaris is the city which lies under the biblical Ramesses. Ramesses of the New Kingdom, Avaris of the Middle Kingdom, the 13th dynasty. It lies underneath the city that's mentioned in the Bible. So when BTAC digs up a huge population of Semitic-speaking peoples with Semitic culture, living in the city of Avaris for several hundred years, and then, at the end of the period, these Semites all leave, depart with their belongings and abandon the city, whatever Manford says, that to me sounds awfully like the Israelites.
Well, what he told me was that there was no connection.
Well, look at the evidence that you've got here. Right at the beginning, at the heart of this community, at the end of the 12th dynasty, we see a Syrian house appear. The Austrians call them Mittelsaal houses. This type of house is found in North Syria, the area where Abraham came from. It's exactly the same style of house you'd expect Jacob to build for himself in Egypt.
Okay, first point then, houses found in Avaris are in the style the Israelites. You know, Syria, Israel was closely connected. They were actually family, people in those tribes. The Israelites would build. Okay, got that point? I'll give you a moment. If I go a little bit too fast, you can't tell me, of course, at the moment. You can always rewind the video and get your notes fixed that way, okay? So that's one evidence that there was a people there that was not Egyptian, but rather they came from the area where Jacob lived. Back to the video.
And we know that the Israelites sought their brides from Haran in that region. They all went back to get their brides from there. So the culture that turns up in Egypt at the end of the 12th dynasty seems to have come from North Syria originally.
So what is the connection with Joseph at Avaris?
Well, after this house of Jacob, if we can call it that, is built, eventually it's flattened, and on top of it, an Egyptian palace is constructed, Egyptian architecture this time. However, the occupant was not Egyptian. The palace had courtyards, colonnades, audience chambers. There was even a robing room. It obviously belonged to some high official of state who was very, very important to that state. Because when somebody gets a palace like this given to them, it means they're being honoured for what they've done for the state. Now in the garden behind the palace, the archaeologists found 12 main graves with memorial chapels on top of them.
You have 12
We have
graves.
12 graves.
And why would that be significant?
Well, think about it. How many sons did Jacob have?
Yeah.
How many tribes were there?
12 tribes.
Exactly. And what's also amazing is the palace had a facade, a portico with 12 pillars.
Again, some further indication. 12 important graves found behind a palace. A palace which had 12 pillars. Now, write this down please. Now, in and of itself that doesn't mean much, but it is telling in a way. You could say, well, these graves could belong to anybody, and 12 pillars, well, they just needed 12 pillars to support whatever was built there. But if you put all these things together, and it builds a picture to show that the Israelites were there. Okay, while I've been talking, you've written this down. Give another few seconds. Back to the film.
So you've got 12 sons, 12 tribes, 12 pillars, and 12 tombs.
Interesting.
Yeah, is that all coincidence? Now, one of these 12 graves was very special because it was a pyramid tomb. This in itself is extraordinary because only pharaohs and queens had pyramid tombs at this time. Yet the person buried in this tomb was not a king. Even so, he was honoured with a king's burial. And inside the chapel of the tomb was a statue. What we know from the statue is that this man had red hair. He had pale yellow skin, which is how Egyptians depict northerners.
Right. Next bit. One extra special. Write down please. Pyramid tomb. With a statue of a man from the north, pale red hair. And there's a bit more about this man, which we will see in a moment. Remember, another man of red hair from that family, Esau. Jacob's brother, he had red hair. It apparently ran in the family. Got all this? Again, just rewind a bit if it's too fast. Freeze it and write it down and then go on. I'm going on now, alright?
He had a throw stick across his shoulder. A unique symbol of office made for this Asiatic official living in the land of Goshen. And on the back of his shoulder, we see the faintest remains of paint, coloured stripes from a multicolored coat.
And that matches exactly with the story of Joseph in the Bible. The multicolored coat as a gift, which shows that he was the favourite of the father. And it almost becomes his insignia, this coat. It's the thing we remember about him most of all.
Do you know of any other statues of a Semite of this kind in Egypt?
There is nothing else like this.
All right. So some further indication. The statue had carried symbols of authority. It also wore a multi-colored coat. Moving on.
In the whole of Egyptian history, nothing at all.
David Rowe is not the only one to see a connection with Joseph at Avaris. Mahoney went to see Professor Charles Ayling, an Egyptologist who has also investigated the events of the Exodus and its connection to Egypt.
Would it be unusual for a tomb to have a statue?
No, it's unusual to have one this large. This would be probably twice the size of a normal human being.
What does that tell you when the statue's larger?
That it's a very important person. Now, of course, this is not a pharaoh's tomb or palace, but the man who lived there, you can identify his nationality by looking at the fragments of the statue. Three things: the hairstyle he has, which we often call the mushroom hairstyle, and then secondly, the weapon he carries over his shoulder called a throw stick, which we would associate with like an Australian boomerang, and then the coloration of the skin. The skin is yellow. All those things indicate that this would have been a Syro-Palestinian.
Dr. Ayling, do you think this is Joseph?
Either it is Joseph or it's somebody that has a career remarkably the same as Joseph did. It's just an incredible thing to find this at this time period.
The Exodus is a story about the birth of a nation. It was time for Mahoney to go to Israel. This gave him the unique opportunity to meet with Israel's president, Shimon Peres, and hear his perspective about the character of Joseph and his rise from slavery to governing Pharaoh's court.
If you look at the way the story is written, God chose him for a mission.
I read somewhere that Tolstoy said that this is the greatest story ever published in human literature. The story of Joseph and his brother and his going to Egypt. Joseph was the first Jewish advisor on earth. And he advised the most powerful empire in the vicinity. He conquered the heart of everybody he saw, men and women.
With God's help, Joseph was able to save Egypt by warning of a coming calamity. 7 years of plenty would be followed by 7 years of terrible famine. Pharaoh is so impressed that he puts Joseph in charge of preparing for the famine and makes him second in command over the entire country.
He managed to achieve this by foretelling or explaining the dreams of Pharaoh about cattle coming out of the water of the Nile. First of all, 7 fat cows, and then 7 lean cows come out and devour the fat cows. It's an extraordinary story, but the clue here is that these cows are coming out of the Nile. It's the Nile itself which is the cause of both the plenty and the famine.
If David's interpretation is right, then the regulation of the Nile may have been key in planning for the coming famine.
There's a canal or a waterway that connects the Nile to the Fayum Basin, which is a large lake area, which has the name Bar Yosef, which means the waterway of Joseph. And this goes back thousands of years as far as we can tell.
Why do you think that that canal has that name?
Because I think he made it. I think it was under his instructions as Vizier of Egypt that that canal was cut. And it was cut to divert half the water from the Nile into the Fayum Basin.
All right, this is our final note. So what we find still today is there, the waterway of Joseph, in Egyptian language, of course, translated, of Joseph. Assumed to have been constructed by him, of course not literally by him, but under his supervision, by him, to divert Nile water to a basin and you can write there as part of his plan to make sure that the land was prepared for the famine to come. And like I said, this waterway is still there. Please write this down, and we will leave it here for today. And I wish you a blessed weekend.